Welcome, 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 welcome. This is the About Mansfield Consumer Advice Series, and this is now week number 2. We appreciate you being here today. We have 3 Consumer Advice Series episodes today. Coming up at noon, we have Adam Cohen. He is a tax manager with Jack Lauderman CPA, and he will be here to answer some questions about tax preparation. 11 o'clock this morning is Philip Washington Jr., and he is our wealth advisor. He is going to give us advice on how to better build your wealth and build for the future. Right now, we have Dr. Joseph Adams. He is our resident health and wellness expert here on the podcast. And if you miss the live stream, you can always find the replay on YouTube. You can find it on LinkedIn, and then we are now also taking the 3 podcasts, the 3 episodes, and putting them all together into an audio podcast, and you can find those on the About Mansfield podcast platforms, whether it's Apple Play or Google Play or Spotify, Pandora, any place where you go to listen to podcasts, you can hear the audio versions. So let's get into it. We've got, again, Dr. Joseph Adams. Welcome. Good morning. It's Friday.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, and welcome back. And as I mentioned last week, we started with basically Migraines 101. What is a migraine? We figured out that you mentioned that women suffer from migraines more than men do, but men do suffer from migraines. And chances are you, the listener, the viewer, either suffer from migraines or someone who does. I mean, that's how prevalent migraines are. And so we're going to start getting into the nitty-gritty of migraines, not only today, but week after week. We're really going to dive deep into migraines. Let me just start. There are trigger points that cause migraines. And doctor, I wanted to have you on to talk about, what are the different types of triggers for migraines?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Steve, because I think a lot of the general population understands that there are triggers for migraines, whether you have them or you don't. You've probably heard certain things like, like red wine can trigger migraines, or like certain cheeses and things like that. And so what I wanted to do was give a much broader understanding of what triggers migraines. And the best way to do that is a little bit of an analogy that I picked up from another colleague. This is not my own analogy, but basically people who have migraines are very sensitive neurologically. And they have, if you'll think about it, like the migraine center in their brain, think of it as like a bucket or a container, okay? And there are 4 different things that can go into that bucket. And those are the groups of triggers, if you will. And every bucket's a little bit different. And so what I mean by that is some people have a very small bucket and some people have a really large bucket. And as those 4 components are going in there, it can overflow that bucket or that migraine area. And that's what triggers one.
So you're overloading the system, really is kind of when you, for instance, let's say red wine, you're overloading that part of the brain that's going to cause a migraine. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, in a way. So if specifically for you, if you're a migraine patient that's triggers are predominantly nutritional in nature, and maybe there's just one very specific one like red wine, that can be the one trigger that will overflow your bucket and give you a migraine. Now, there's other stuff that goes into that bucket as well. And so it's all about figuring out the triggers and managing all those components.
Any other specific triggers that people should be aware of? You mentioned red wine, which I happen to love, but I don't suffer from migraines, so I guess I'm okay there. But for those who do suffer from migraines, what could be some of the other triggers?
Well, that's the thing is there's so many different ones technically, and it's really individualized. And so I think what we'll do is maybe go through a bigger list in the future. But one thing I wanted to talk to people about was the different components. And so there, like you've mentioned, there is a nutritional component. There's also a hormonal component,
Oh, wow.
very common with females, and then also a musculoskeletal component. That's, being a chiropractor. That's one that we deal a lot with in the office. And then the last one would be a neurological component. So those are your four.
All right. So let's get into the specifics then. Take the first one, and can you kind of narrow down, or maybe even to put into layman's terms about the trigger of how that works? You mentioned the four trigger points. Maybe go through each one individually and talk about how they actually work.
So each individual one is, like I said, like a grouping, right? And so if you take like the nutritional one, which we mentioned, in that nutritional one, there's all these different components. And what we have to do is figure out if nutrition is a big part of a migraine sufferer's triggering mechanisms, right? And that's individual. But now in that nutritional component, some of the bigger things that people could look out for or work on is their blood sugar regulation. So that just means keeping your blood sugar stabilized through the day. Don't let it crash. So don't eat too little. Don't wait too long between meals. Also, on the other to that, don't eat too much, right? Don't go and have way too much food, so much so that you feel tired after you eat. That's when you know you've overdone it and your blood sugar has spiked and now crashed. So blood sugar management would be one. Caffeine reduction is another very important one as far as diet goes. And then a lot of the more common ones that people do know about with the red wines, the cheeses, some of the chocolates and things like that. So those are some of the more specific ones in nutritional law.
Okay, so here's the big question. What's the most important one?
Ooh, it's the one that triggers your migraine. It's the one that is specific to you. So there's no like important one for everybody. There's an important one for that specific migraine patient. And that's why you need a very detailed exam and history to figure out which one it is. And so that we can manage it.
So if someone is suffering from migraines and they don't know how to manage it, is this something they can come to you and you'll work with the patient on kind of narrowing it down to, well, it could be nutrition, it could be this or that. You're that's what you manage. That's what you are an expert in. Is yes.
So that is what we do. Yes. When somebody comes in and they're like, "Hey, I've got migraines," the first thing we got to figure out is it a migraine, which we covered that last time. And then the next thing is we talk about diet, and then we talk about hormones. If you're a female, hey, tell me about your hormones. And then we may talk about structural stuff. Like, hey, do you have a tight neck, shoulders? Do you have neck pain? Tell me a little bit more about your history of accidents and traumas. And then the next thing would be talking about neurological factors. Do you get dizzy? Do you get fatigue? Do you have sensitivity to light? And that's how we tease all this stuff out.
Okay. If someone wanted more information about migraines, about your service, about how to manage migraines, how can they get in touch with Dr. Joseph Adams?
Best way is to go to our website, calibrationmansfield.com.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay, calibrationmansfield.com. Dr. Joseph Adams, appreciate your time. It's that simple. We do this every Friday for 10 minutes. People tune in and tune out. That's it. It's very, very quick. We're going to get a little deeper into migraines next week because that's the series that we're doing right here. That's the About Mansfield Consumer Advice Series. And with Dr. Joseph Adams, again, from Calibration Chiropractic right here in Mansfield. It is focusing on migraines and how to best manage those. One other question then. Migraines don't ever go away then. Or do they? Or is it just best managing them?
So they don't technically go away. It's always going to be a neurological disease, but you have to manage them during the main years. And most of the time that's females' productive years, like 35 up to 55. Now, if you're a female, the likelihood of them going away once you hit menopause is pretty high. So there is a possibility it may reduce, but you'll still always have them, just less attacks.
Gotcha. There are ways to manage
There
migraines.
are.
All right. Dr. Joseph Adams, calibration chiropractic right here in Mansfield. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Steve.